Good Wednesday afternoon. It is October 4th, and we almost made it a full 4 days without a named tropical system out in the Atlantic basin. Came to an end today. We have Tropical Depression number 16, just issued at 11 o'clock this morning, likely going to be upgraded to Tropical Storm Nate, our 14th named storm of the season. As we get on into this evening, Hurricane Hunter aircraft are expected to fly out into the storm later this afternoon to determine if that upgrade is indeed necessary. We are in October now, getting towards the tail end of hurricane season, but October is the third most active month out of the 6-month season. About 17% of all named storms happen in October, and we've had quite a few notable ones. Most recently last year, Hurricane Matthew that moved up along the eastern coast of Florida and up on through the mid-Atlantic. All right, in October, we look towards a different area for the breeding ground of tropical systems. And this month, it shifts more to the Gulf of Mexico, the western parts of the Caribbean Sea. And then also, we'll still watch the parts of the Atlantic Ocean here that's closer to the eastern seaboard. Not really seeing the Cape Verde type systems rolling off the African coastline and kind of exploding as they move across the Atlantic. Don't really see that so much in October. As I mentioned, Nate is the next name on the board here, making it our 14th named storm of the season. Again, not named just yet, but it likely will be by later today or even on into the next 36 hours or so once we determine, the hurricane hunters determine, if there is indeed a closed circulation or a organized circulation within the system. Here's how things are looking on the satellite imagery this afternoon so far. There's a lot going on, and it's very symbolic of what we would find in early autumn, more importantly in October. We have a very broad front here. This brought the plunge of cooler air through much of the eastern seaboard of the United States just a few short days ago. It is still lingering, and if these do dip far enough south, they tend to interact sometimes with some of the tropical systems, making them a little bit more disorganized. But what's going on here in the far southwestern parts of the Caribbean Sea, this system, Tropical Depression number 16, is kind of tucked away and sheltered from that, kind of sitting in bathwater right now. The water temperatures there extraordinarily warm. Here's how it looks, a close-up image here on the infrared satellite imagery. What this does is it tells us the cloud top temperatures. That's important. The higher the thunderstorm cloud is, the colder the cloud tops are. And we're seeing them very, very tall and very impressive here around the center of circulation of the system right now. The white colors indicating very cold cloud tops, and there's an increasingly larger number of them around that center of circulation there, showing us that the storm is starting to get itself together a little bit. It's also working with something called the Central American monsoon or Central American gyre. You may have heard this, and this is a natural kind of circulation that sits over Central America in the rainy season. And what this does is it forms little spin-offs in the atmosphere. And that's what we're seeing there. And what this is going to kind of do is kickstart the system as it jogs northwards. There's moistening air in this area, so that's something that storms need, moist air, low wind shear, which it has as well, and the very, very warm ocean temperatures we'll talk about in just a minute. Now, this is the current and forecast wind shear. Now, if you remember, tropical systems need low wind shear to kind of develop and sustain themselves. The reason why wind shear kind of is detrimental to storm development is because the stronger the winds, the lower the vertical development of these storms are. So they kind of blow the tops right off of thunderstorms as they develop. When there's a real lack of any wind shear, they get to grow tall and vertical, and the storm structure becomes much more sound. So we're seeing an environment very favorable for that right now for low wind shear. Also, very, very warm water. You can even call it hot. 85 to 88 degree ocean temperature is extraordinarily warm, and this is all sitting in that general area where we're seeing Tropical Depression number 16 form. These numbers, a good 2 to 5 degrees above normal for this time of the year. There's really been a lack of any storm development in this area, so the heat has just been building and building, and oceans hang on to heat a whole lot longer than land masses do. So that's why these temperatures have kind of risen and risen and risen. And because they extend to such a depth, this storm isn't really going to kick up that much cool water from beneath. So there's almost an endless supply of fuel for the storm. There will be one thing that may be detrimental from this becoming a major system. I don't think that's going to happen. Here's the latest advisory here from the Hurricane Center as of 11 o'clock this morning. Again, a tropical depression. That means that it does have winds, tropical storm force, because you see 35-mile-per-hour winds. You need 34 or greater to be considered a tropical storm. But the circulation, the center of it, isn't all that organized yet. That's likely why we're seeing the hurricane hunters flying out into it to see if that circulation is indeed better organized, leading to that upgrade to Tropical Storm Nate, probably in the next 24 hours, if not sooner than that. Let's go through the track here because it brings it up and over its first landfall just within the next 12 to 24 hours here over parts of Nicaragua. It moves over land there. Again, land interaction with tropical systems is not a good thing, but it is quick moving. It reemerges back over very warm waters for another good 12 to 24 hours. And this particular track does take the center line just off the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. If it was to stay over open water, of course, that would lead to further strengthening. But the cone of uncertainty does stretch far enough west that it does encompass some land masses of the Yucatan there. So if it was to make landfall for the second time, it would likely weaken a little bit more. Nonetheless, what it does here, it goes into the open Gulf of Mexico, which has very, very warm waters this time of the year and for a prolonged period of time, for a good 24 hours or so. And that's why it's likely to strengthen to a Category 1 hurricane by that point as it sets its sights on possibly the panhandle of Florida. This National Hurricane Center track, very favorable to the European model. I'm going to show you why, because the GFS is much different than what this is depicting here. It leans way off to the west, so they're heavily favoring the European model there. It makes landfall, and as you know, it will fall apart as it moves north. The good news about this is it's going to bring some much-needed rainfall to parts of the southeastern United States by early next week. So that's some good news with this system. Let's go through the models now. We're going to start off here with all the different tropical models, showing the same sort of thing. Landfall number 1 here over Nicaragua and Honduras, back over open water, and then some of these leaning a little bit farther to the west, favoring a secondary landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula before all of them emerging into the Gulf of Mexico and taking a spread here from New Orleans all the way to St. Mark's in Florida near Panama City. So that's a huge spread by the time we get towards the weekend there. And again, as you saw, the Hurricane Center track greatly favors that easterly trend from the European model. Here's the GFS ensemble. That's one model, run 20 different times with different settings, different tweaks to the model there. So here's how it looks. Pretty good consensus over the next 24 hours. And then notice that is a heavily favored westward track here over towards New Orleans and even parts of western Louisiana by that point, almost entirely leaving out the panhandle of Florida there. So the GFS and Euro vary greatly on where the storm goes. So certainly the entire Gulf Coast of the United States should watch this very carefully. Now I want to compare the two models, the GFS and the European. What you're looking at here is the purple shading is going to be the GFS or the American model. The orange is going to be the European model. Right now, obviously, right on top of each other. They're initializing it the same. But as we go through the next few days, they're looking pretty good. I know it's kind of hard to follow here, but look for those two smaller circles. That's the center of the circulation depicted by each model. Over the open waters here, and then it moves northwards. Notice a great variation here between the two models as we go in through the next couple days past that. You have the European model that's much stronger and off towards the east, and then you have the GFS, which is a little bit weaker and off towards the west, possibly making landfall somewhere around New Orleans or even towards Alabama and Mississippi as we get into the parts of the weekend and early next week. So a big variation here between the two models, not only in intensity, but also location. So we're going to have to watch it very, very closely. There's a lot of factors here, very, very warm ocean waters, which could lead to rapid intensification. But I really think that thanks to the fast forward movement of the storm, it's a quick mover. It's not going to sit and stall like we saw with the past storms that really built up that strength. It's going to move quickly, so it might not have enough time to really become a monster of a storm. Nonetheless, tropical systems are nothing to mess with. If you have any questions, you can join the conversation. You can find me on social media if you have a question or anything like that, or if you just want to say hello, you can find me on Facebook, meteorologist Tim Pandagis, and on Twitter, 13 Tim Pandagis.